That night was intense and filled with mixed emotions. It was a quiet Friday when everything unfolded. I lay on my back, watching the soft shadows cast by the moonlight on the ceiling, my thoughts scattered and my heart restless. I felt lonely because my husband, Henry, was going away on a business trip. For the next 2 months and 2 weeks, we wouldn't see each other. Suddenly, a faint creak at the door broke the silence. I was not alone. I sat up slightly, squinting at the figure standing there. Framed in the dim light of the doorway was my son, Alex, 19 years old, his broad shoulders standing out under the hallway light. He hesitated, gripping the doorframe as if he needed support. "Mom," he said softly, his tone uncertain. I rubbed my eyes, a sharp pang striking my heart at the sound of his voice. "Alex? What's wrong?" He didn't answer immediately. He remained still, his shadow stretching across the room. Finally, he stepped inside, his bare feet making soft sounds against the carpet. There was something in the way he moved, hesitant, almost vulnerable. He made the air feel heavy. "I can't sleep," he whispered. I glanced at the clock on my nightstand, 2:14 a.m. He was never one to wake me unless something was truly troubling him. My chest tightened as I sat up in bed and motioned for him to come closer. "What's wrong?" I asked gently. He hesitated again before sitting on the edge of the bed, his posture tense, his hands clenched together on his lap. I watched him for a moment, waiting, but he kept staring at the floor. The tension radiating from him was almost tangible. "Alex," I said softly, "you can talk to me. I'm here." He let out a shaky breath, his fingers fidgeting with the hem of his shirt. "It's hard to explain," he said finally. He was feeling something. He was feeling many things, and he didn't know how to process them. His words made me uneasy. I leaned forward slightly, keeping my voice calm despite the tightening in my stomach. "In what way?" He looked at me, his eyes searching mine with an intensity that unsettled me. "It's someone," he said. "Someone I've been thinking about a lot. Someone you wouldn't expect." For a moment, I felt relief. Perhaps it was a classmate, someone he had a crush on but didn't know how to handle. Alex had always been reserved with his emotions, bottling them up until they threatened to spill over. "It's okay," I reassured him with a small smile. "Who is it? Someone from university?" He shook his head quickly, looking down. "No," he said, his voice barely audible. "It's not someone from university." "Then who?" A strange unease settled over me. "Alex, you can tell me," I urged. "Whatever it is, we'll figure it out." He took a deep breath, his chest rising and falling as if he were gathering every ounce of courage he had. When he spoke again, his voice trembled. "It's complicated, Mom," he said at last. "I've always felt a special connection with you. Something I don't know how to explain. Something I might have misunderstood." The words caught in my throat. For a moment, I couldn't speak. I couldn't think. My mind struggled to grasp what he had just said, but the weight of the situation was overwhelming. He suddenly stood up and began pacing the room, as if trapped. He ran his fingers through his hair, tugging at it in frustration. "I know this sounds confusing," he said quickly. "I know it's different. But I can't help it. I've tried for so long to understand it, to ignore it. But it's always there." I stared at him, my heart clenching. "Alex, this isn't." "Don't tell me it's not real," he interrupted, his voice thick with emotion. "I know what I feel. I've never felt this way about anyone else. It's not just admiration or simple affection. It's something deeper, Mom." "Alex," I said again, my voice unsteady. "You are my son. What you're feeling is confusion and idealization." "I don't know," he cried out, his voice breaking. "You've always mattered to me, Mom. You're the only one who truly understands me, the only one who makes me feel seen." How could that not mean something? Tears burned my eyes as I struggled to process his words. My son, the boy I had raised and loved, was expressing feelings I couldn't fully comprehend, emotions he perhaps didn't even understand himself. Something inside me stirred. And now, thinking about it, I realized I had never considered the possibility of change, the possibility that the life I had built, a life that seemed to be running on autopilot, was about to take an unexpected turn. Before I could respond, a soft knock at the door broke the silence. I turned toward the sound, suddenly feeling exposed. "Who is it?" I asked, my voice slightly unsteady. The door opened, and Mark, my husband, stepped inside. "Is everything okay?" he asked. He entered the room, looking exhausted from his trip, but his expression shifted quickly as he sensed the atmosphere. I didn't know if he noticed the tension between Alex and me, or if he chose to ignore it. "Yes," I said quickly, perhaps too quickly. "We were just talking." Alex nodded awkwardly. "I'm going to bed," he murmured. "Good night, Mom." "Good night, Dad." Mark didn't seem to notice Alex's sudden departure, perhaps too tired to pay attention. "Good night, son," he said as Alex walked away. Then he turned his focus back to me as the door closed behind him. A strange silence filled the space between Mark and me. I didn't know where to begin or how to explain to him that things weren't okay, that I wasn't the woman he had married, and that everything felt foreign to me. I didn't want to hurt him, but keeping silent was hurting me. Mark sat on the edge of the bed, his gaze searching my face for an explanation. "Sarah," he asked gently, his voice as sweet as ever, "I can tell something is bothering you. What's going on?" I didn't answer right away, unsure of where to start. "I don't know, Mark," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "I feel like we're living in two separate worlds. I'm here, but I don't feel like I'm really here." His expression softened, though I could see a flicker of frustration in his eyes. "You mean, are we okay? Isn't everything fine?" I couldn't bring myself to answer. How could I explain that it wasn't enough, that I longed for something deeper, something more meaningful? But no matter how I phrased it, I felt like I was betraying him. "I don't know what to say," I murmured. "Give yourself time," he said, but I wasn't sure if time would change anything. Time had passed, yet I still felt stuck, lost in a life where I barely recognized myself. I turned my back to Mark and lay down, hoping that the darkness would give me the answers I so desperately needed. The days that followed blurred together. Mark tried to connect with me, but I felt myself growing more distant. The conversation with Alex lingered in my mind, a silent weight I couldn't escape. No matter how hard I tried to act normal, deep down, I knew I was unraveling. He seemed different, too. The carefree young man I had known had been replaced by someone withdrawn, with a quiet sadness in his eyes whenever he looked at me. I could tell he was still troubled, but I didn't know how to reassure him, or myself. One evening, with Mark working late, I was home alone with Alex. After dinner, he had gone to his room, but I could hear his footsteps pacing back and forth, echoing in the silence. I couldn't stop thinking about our earlier conversation. I wanted to fix everything, to make things better for him, but I felt too tangled in my own confusion to support him the way he needed. Finally, I decided to talk to him. I hesitated outside his door for a moment, unsure of what to say or whether he even wanted to talk to me after everything. At last, I knocked gently. "Alex, can I come in?" There was a pause before he answered. "Yeah, Mom." I slowly opened the door and found him sitting on the edge of his bed, staring at the floor. He didn't look up as I stepped inside, but the tension in the room was unmistakable. "Are you okay?" I asked, trying to sound normal even though I didn't feel it. He shrugged, lost in thought. "I don't know, Mom. I'm just trying to understand everything. I don't get why things feel so strange between us." I sat down beside him, unsure of how to respond. "I know, sweetheart. I know things are hard right now, for me, for us." He nodded slowly, his eyes still fixed on the floor. "I just want you to be happy, Mom. I don't want you to feel like this." His words hit me deeply. How had we gotten to this point? How had things come to a place where my son was trying to understand my unhappiness? I know, Alex, I said softly. I want to be happy too. I just don't know how. Silence filled the room, stretching between us until neither of us seemed ready to break it. Finally, Alex looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. Have you thought about what you really want, Mom? What would make you happy? His question struck something deep within me. Of course, I had thought about it constantly, but finding the answer wasn't so simple. How could I tell him that I wasn't sure if I could continue this marriage? That I felt suffocated in a role I no longer recognized? How could I explain that part of me felt trapped while another part felt on the verge of something entirely new? I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his question press against my chest. I don't know, I admitted. But I promise I'm trying to figure it out. I'm trying to be honest with myself and with you. He gave me a small, understanding smile, though the worry in his eyes remained. Just, don't forget us, Mom. Don't forget me. I held him tightly, hoping that somehow, I could shield him from the storm of confusion and chaos inside me. I wasn't sure if what I was doing was right. But I knew I couldn't lie to him. I will never forget you, I whispered, my voice thick with emotion and promise. But as I held him, I couldn't help but wonder, had everything already changed? Had I drifted too far from the person I used to be? And if so, did I even know how to stop anymore? The following weeks were marked by tension, an unspoken strain that seemed to seep into every corner of the house. Mark carried on with his daily routine, work, his subtle attempts to reconnect with me. But I felt myself slipping further into the certainty that I no longer recognized who I was or where I was going. My conversations with Alex had become more meaningful, but they also made it painfully clear how much we had lost in the process. One night, as Mark was cooking dinner in the kitchen, I saw Pat standing in the hallway, staring at the closed door to our bedroom. I had been avoiding it for days, unwilling to confront the reality of everything that had happened, everything that was still happening. My thoughts had been consumed by strange feelings, by the growing distance I felt from everyone around me. But suddenly, something inside me urged me to face it. Slowly, I reached for the door handle and stepped inside. The room that had once been my refuge no longer felt comforting. Instead, it felt foreign, empty, suffocatingly silent. I looked around, noticing the small details that had once brought me peace, family photos, books, the memories we had built over the years. Now, they all felt like relics from another life. A life that no longer felt like mine. The door creaked behind me. Before I could react, Mark appeared in the doorway. His presence startled me, and I quickly turned to face him. Sarah, he said softly, concern evident in his voice. What's going on? You've been so distant lately. You're not yourself. For a moment, I couldn't find the words to answer. I wanted to tell him everything. To end the battle. The disconnection. The feeling of being lost. But the words wouldn't come. I just stood there, not knowing where to begin. I don't know, I whispered, my voice barely audible. I don't know if I can keep going like this, Mark. I'm so confused. I don't even know who I am anymore. Mark's brow furrowed. His expression was gentle but filled with concern. You don't have to go through this alone, he said. We can get through this together. We've been through worse, Sarah. This is just a rough patch. But it didn't feel like a temporary struggle. It felt like everything we had built together was slowly crumbling, and I wasn't sure if it could be repaired. Worse, I wasn't sure if I wanted it to be. I don't know if I want that, I blurted out before I could stop myself. Mark's hand recoiled slightly, his face hardening. What do you mean? He asked, his voice tight. Are you saying you don't want to be with me anymore? The weight of his question pressed down on me, filling the air with unbearable tension. This was the moment. The point of no return. But I didn't have an answer, not one I could put into words. I don't know what I want, Mark, I admitted, my voice trembling. I don't know if I'm still the person you married. The silence between us grew heavier, broken only by the distant sounds of dinner cooking in the kitchen. Finally, Mark sighed, his shoulders sinking as though carrying an invisible weight. "I can't fix this for you, Sarah," he whispered. "I can't decide for you. But I also can't keep pretending. We need to figure this out, together or apart. But we can't keep going like this."